The morning sun cast long shadows across Atlanta International Airport's bustling Terminal B as passengers lined up to board Flight 2471 to Chicago. Among them stood Mr. Kumar, a well-dressed software engineer in his mid-40s, checking his boarding pass one last time before joining the crew. The crisp autumn air from the terminal's air conditioning provided a sharp contrast to the warm Georgia morning outside. As passengers filed onto the plane, the usual buzz of conversation and shuffling of carry-on bags filled the cabin. Flight attendant Ms. Rivera, a veteran of the skies with 15 years of experience, stood at the entrance, greeting passengers with what seemed like a practiced smile. However, keen observers might have noticed how that smile wavered and changed depending on who stepped through the doorway. In row 14, a young marketing executive from Atlanta couldn't help but notice these subtle shifts in Ms. Rivera's demeanor. She watched as the flight attendant warmly directed some passengers to their seats while barely acknowledging others. The pattern was becoming uncomfortably clear. Ms. Rivera's courtesy seemed to depend entirely on what the passengers looked like. The morning flight was nearly full, with business people tapping away on laptops and families settling in for the 2-hour journey. The overhead bins quickly filled up, leading to the familiar dance of passengers trying to find space for their rolling suitcases. Through it all, Ms. Rivera's selective hospitality continued, creating an invisible but palpable tension in the cabin. A businessman in a navy suit struggled to fit his bag in the overhead compartment. Ms. Rivera rushed to assist him, her voice honey-sweet as she helped rearrange the luggage. Just moments later, when Mr. Kumar faced the same challenge, she walked past without a glance, leaving him to manage on his own. Several passengers exchanged knowing looks, but no one spoke up, yet. The pre-flight preparations continued as flight attendants checked seatbelts and emergency exits. Ms. Rivera moved through the cabin with efficiency, but her interactions told two different stories. For some passengers, she was the picture of professional courtesy, adjusting their seats and offering pre-flight water. For others, including Mr. Kumar, she was barely present, rushing past their requests with minimal acknowledgement. As the plane taxied toward the runway, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their departure to Chicago. The weather was clear, promising a smooth flight, but the atmosphere in the cabin was anything but. Through the mundane activities of safety demonstrations and final checks, an undercurrent of discomfort rippled through the passengers who had witnessed Ms. Rivera's behavior. Little did anyone know that this routine morning flight was about to become anything but ordinary. The seeds of confrontation had already been planted in those first few minutes of boarding. As the plane lifted off the runway, leaving the Atlanta skyline behind, tensions were quietly building, just like the aircraft climbing through the morning clouds. What started as subtle differences in treatment would soon escalate into something none of the passengers expected, turning an everyday flight into a moment that would spark national conversation and change airline policies forever. But for now, as the seatbelt signs dinged off at cruising altitude, passengers settled in for what they thought would be just another business trip or family journey, unaware of the drama about to unfold at 30,000 feet. About 30 minutes into the flight, the cabin had grown uncomfortably cold. The air conditioning was blasting at full force, making several passengers reach for their jackets. Mr. Kumar, still settling into his seat after the turbulent takeoff, felt the chill more than most. He packed his warm clothes in his checked luggage, not expecting the aircraft to feel like a freezer. Looking around, he noticed other passengers wrapping themselves in airline-provided blankets. A young mother across the aisle had just received one from another flight attendant and was tucking her small child in. Feeling optimistic, Mr. Kumar pressed the call button above his seat, hoping to request a blanket of his own. The soft chime of the call button echoed through the cabin. 1 minute passed, then 5. Ms. Rivera walked past his row twice, deliberately avoiding eye contact. On her third pass, Mr. Kumar raised his hand slightly, speaking in a gentle, respectful tone. "Excuse me, would it be possible to get a blanket? It's quite cold." The change in Ms. Rivera's expression was instant and harsh. She stopped abruptly, turning to face him with barely concealed irritation. "We're busy right now," she snapped, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "You'll have to wait." She stormed off before Mr. Kumar could respond, leaving him stunned by the unnecessary hostility. A businessman 2 rows ahead had witnessed the exchange. He received his blanket from the same flight attendant just moments earlier, accompanied by a warm smile and friendly chat. Now he shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing back at Mr. Kumar with a mix of sympathy and embarrassment. The young marketing executive who had noticed Ms. Rivera's behavior during boarding couldn't believe what she was seeing. She watched as the flight attendant continued her rounds, cheerfully helping other passengers with various requests, bringing extra pillows, offering magazines, and yes, distributing blankets to those who asked. Minutes ticked by, and the temperature seemed to drop even further. Mr. Kumar rubbed his arms, trying to stay warm. An elderly gentleman sitting beside him noticed his discomfort and was about to offer his own blanket when Ms. Rivera returned to their section, pushing the beverage cart. Once again, Mr. Kumar politely tried to get her attention. "I'm still quite cold," he said softly. "Is there perhaps a blanket available now?" The response was even more shocking than before. Ms. Rivera's voice dripped with disdain as she replied, "If you were better prepared for air travel, you wouldn't need to keep bothering the crew." The cabin grew quiet. Several passengers stopped their conversations, turning to watch the scene unfold. The elderly gentleman next to Mr. Kumar cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. A few rows back, someone whispered, "Did she really just say that?" The tension in the air was thicker than the clouds outside. Mr. Kumar sat silently, his dignity intact despite the humiliation. He'd faced similar treatment before, but something about this incident felt different, perhaps because it was happening in such a confined space, with so many witnesses. What made the situation even more apparent was how Ms. Rivera continued to treat other passengers with warmth and courtesy immediately after dismissing Mr. Kumar. She laughed with a couple in the row behind him, joking about the weather in Chicago while handing them their requested blankets without hesitation. The young marketing executive pulled out her phone, beginning to document the incidents. Other passengers exchanged knowing glances, their faces showing a mix of concern and growing anger. The flight was only an hour in, but it was becoming clear that this wouldn't be just another routine journey from Atlanta to Chicago. Little did anyone know that this moment, a simple request for a blanket, would spark a chain of events that would not only change lives but reshape airline policies across the country. As the plane continued its journey northward, the temperature in the cabin might have been cold, but tensions were about to reach boiling point. As the flight reached its cruising altitude, the drink service began. The gentle rumble of the beverage cart moving down the aisle mixed with casual conversation among passengers. Mr. Kumar sat quietly in his seat, still trying to warm himself by rubbing his arms, the earlier blanket incident weighing heavily on his mind. Ms. Rivera started from the front of the plane, methodically working her way through each row. Her interactions were a study in contrasts, warm smiles and friendly chatter with some passengers, while others received barely a glance. The marketing executive, still watching closely, noticed how Ms. Rivera would lean in to make personal drink recommendations to certain travelers while rushing past others. When the cart reached Mr. Kumar's row, something strange happened. Ms. Rivera served the elderly gentleman next to him, even asking if he'd like extra ice in his ginger ale. But when it came to Mr. Kumar's turn, she simply pushed the cart forward, acting as if his seat was empty. He raised his hand politely, trying to catch her attention. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady despite the obvious tension. "I haven't been served yet." The response that followed left nearby passengers in shocked silence. Ms. Rivera turned around sharply, her face twisted with obvious annoyance. "Some people just don't understand how to wait their turn," she announced loudly, making no attempt to hide her disdain. "Always demanding special treatment." A young child in the row ahead turned around in his seat, confused by the hostility in the flight attendant's voice. His mother quickly turned him back around, but not before shooting a sympathetic glance at Mr. Kumar. The elderly gentleman beside him shifted uncomfortably, clutching his ginger ale with trembling hands. The marketing executive wasn't the only one recording now. A college student 3 rows back had their phone out, carefully documenting the escalating situation. Other passengers exchanged worried glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and growing anger. The atmosphere in the cabin had become thick with tension. What made the scene even more disturbing was how quickly Ms. Rivera would switch between her two personas. Just moments after her harsh treatment of Mr. Kumar, she was cheerfully chatting with other passengers about their drink choices, recommending her favorite cocktail mix with a bright smile. A business traveler across the aisle couldn't contain himself any longer. "He just wanted a drink like everyone else," he said, his voice firm but controlled. Ms. Rivera shot him a look that could freeze water. "I'm handling this section my way," she replied curtly. "If anyone has complaints about my service, they can take it up with the airline." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Her service had been notably selective. Several passengers had noticed how she'd skip over certain people during the drink service, only to be excessively accommodating to others. The pattern was impossible to ignore, and the discomfort in the cabin grew with each passing minute. Mr. Kumar maintained his composure throughout the ordeal, though anyone watching could see the hurt in his eyes. He'd faced discrimination before, but rarely so blatantly, and never in such a confined space with nowhere to retreat. The dignity with which he handled the situation made Ms. Rivera's behavior seem even more outrageous. As the drink service continued toward the back of the plane, whispered conversations broke out among the passengers. Some shared similar experiences on other flights, while others discussed how to report what they were witnessing. The marketing executive had already opened her laptop, drafting an email to the airline's customer service department. The flight was barely halfway to Chicago, but it was becoming clear that this incident wasn't going to be brushed aside like so many others. The collective tension in the cabin felt like a rubber band stretched to its limit, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before it snapped. Little did anyone realize that the drink service drama was just the beginning. As the plane continued its journey northward, Ms. Rivera's behavior would cross another line, one that would finally push the passengers from silent observation to active intervention. The seatbelt sign had been off for about 20 minutes when Mr. Kumar realized he needed to use the restroom. He'd been avoiding it, knowing he might have another encounter with Ms. Rivera, but nature's call couldn't be ignored any longer. Taking a deep breath, he stood up carefully, trying to draw as little attention as possible. As he made his way down the aisle, other passengers gave him encouraging nods. The mother with the young child even smiled supportively, understanding the courage it took to move about the cabin after what had happened. The bathroom at the front of the plane was vacant, its indicator showing green. Just as Mr. Kumar was about to reach for the door handle, Ms. Rivera suddenly appeared, stepping directly into his path. "Where do you think you're going?" Her voice cut through the cabin's quiet hum like a knife. Several passengers looked up from their books and tablets, startled by her hostile tone. Mr. Kumar spoke softly, maintaining his composure. "I'm just going to use the restroom, if that's all right." Ms. Rivera's response was immediate and shocking. She planted herself firmly in front of the bathroom door, arms crossed. "This restroom is out of order," she declared loudly, despite the green indicator light clearly showing it was available. "You'll have to use the one at the back of the plane." The marketing executive, who had been watching the situation unfold, noticed another passenger use the same bathroom just minutes earlier. She wasn't the only one who remembered. The college student a few rows back was already pulling out their phone again, sensing another incident in the making. "But I just saw someone use it," spoke up an elderly woman nearby. Ms. Rivera shot her a glare that could have melted steel. "I said it's out of order now," she insisted, her voice rising. And if you continue to be aggressive, she turned back to Mr. Kumar, I'll have to report you to the captain for disruptive behavior. The accusation of aggression was so absurd it left the surrounding passengers speechless. Mr. Kumar had been nothing but polite, speaking in quiet, respectful tones while maintaining a calm demeanor. If anything, it was Ms. Rivera who was creating a disruption with her confrontational attitude. A flight attendant from business class, drawn by the commotion, appeared at the curtain divider. She looked uncertain, clearly uncomfortable with her colleague's behavior, but unsure how to intervene. The tension in the cabin had reached a breaking point. The businessman who had witnessed the earlier blanket incident stood up. This is ridiculous, he said firmly. We can all see he's done nothing wrong. Others began to nod in agreement, some shifting in their seats as if ready to stand as well. Ms. Rivera's face flushed with anger. Are you interfering with crew member duties? She threatened, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. More passengers were standing now, phones out, recording the unfolding scene. The documentation was becoming impossible to ignore. The business class flight attendant finally stepped forward. The bathroom is functioning normally, she said quietly, her words carrying clearly in the tense silence. There's no reason it can't be used. Ms. Rivera turned to her colleague, betrayal written across her face. Mr. Kumar remained still through all of this, his dignity intact despite the humiliation. He'd become the center of attention against his will, but his calm demeanor in the face of such treatment spoke volumes. The contrast between his composure and Ms. Rivera's increasing agitation was stark. Other crew members were now aware of the situation, exchanging worried glances as they moved through the cabin. The flight was still an hour from Chicago, but it was clear that Ms. Rivera's behavior had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The passengers' silent observation had transformed into active resistance against injustice. As phones continued recording and more passengers stood in solidarity, this moment of confrontation was becoming more than just another incident of discrimination. It was turning into a tipping point that would soon force the airline industry to face its deeper issues. The marketing executive could no longer remain a silent observer. Rising from her seat with phone in hand, she moved closer to the confrontation near the bathroom. I've been recording everything since the blanket incident, she announced clearly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Every single interaction has been documented. Her words sent a ripple through the cabin. Other passengers, emboldened by her courage, began speaking up too. The college student raised their phone. I've got footage too, starting from the drink service. The businessman who had witnessed the blanket incident stood up as well. I'm a frequent flyer with over 1 million miles on this airline. This kind of behavior is completely unacceptable. Ms. Rivera's face flickered with uncertainty for the first time. She looked around the cabin, suddenly realizing she was surrounded by witnesses. The elderly woman who had spoken up earlier reached for her grandson's tablet, saying, My grandson just showed me how to upload videos directly to social media. Should we share what we've seen here? The business class flight attendant, still standing nearby, stepped forward again. Ms. Rivera, she said quietly but firmly, perhaps you should take your break now. I can cover this section. But Ms. Rivera wasn't ready to back down. These passengers are interfering with crew member duties, she insisted, though her voice had lost its earlier authority. A retired teacher in row 12 spoke up next. I spent 30 years in the classroom, she said, her voice carrying the weight of experience. I taught my students to stand up against injustice when they see it. What kind of example would I be setting if I stayed silent now? More passengers began sharing their own stories. A healthcare worker described similar experiences she'd witnessed in hospitals. A restaurant owner talked about training his staff specifically to prevent such discrimination. The cabin had transformed from a space of uncomfortable silence to one of active solidarity. Mr. Kumar, still standing quietly near the bathroom, was visibly moved by the support. The young mother with the child reached out and touched his arm gently. "We're so sorry this happened to you," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "This isn't right, and it isn't who we are as people." The other crew members were now huddled near the galley, discussing how to handle the situation. One of them was already on the phone with the ground crew in Chicago, knowing this incident would require immediate attention upon landing. Ms. Rivera's defiance finally began to crack under the weight of collective disapproval. She stepped away from the bathroom door, muttering something about filing a report. As she retreated toward the back of the plane, passengers watched her go with a mixture of sadness and determination. A young tech professional stood up, addressing everyone within earshot. "I've got contacts at several news outlets," she offered. "With everyone's permission, I think this story needs to be shared. Not for revenge, but for change." Nods of agreement rippled through the cabin. The marketing executive had already started organizing the evidence. "I'm creating a shared folder where everyone can upload their videos and statements," she announced. "We need to ensure this is documented properly." Passengers began passing around business cards and contact information, determined to stay connected after landing. The atmosphere in the cabin had transformed completely. What started as uncomfortable tension had evolved into purposeful unity. Passengers who had been strangers just hours ago were now united in their commitment to addressing this injustice. As the plane began its initial descent into Chicago, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom with the standard arrival announcements. But everyone knew this flight would be remembered for much more than its arrival time. In standing together against discrimination, these passengers had transformed a moment of shame into one of hope and solidarity. The young marketing executive looked around at her fellow passengers, now busy exchanging contact information and sharing their own stories. She realized that sometimes the most powerful changes start not with grand gestures, but with simple acts of courage and solidarity at 30,000 feet. The videos hit social media before Flight 2471 even touched down in Chicago. Within hours, the scenes from the flight had been shared thousands of times across multiple platforms. The airline's social media team was caught off guard by the flood of comments, shares, and angry reactions pouring in from around the world. The marketing executive's carefully documented footage showed the progression of events clearly, from the initial blanket denial to the drink service discrimination, and finally, the bathroom confrontation. Each clip painted a damning picture of systematic mistreatment that was impossible to dismiss as a misunderstanding. By evening, major news networks had picked up the story. The airline's corporate headquarters found their phones ringing nonstop. Their first response was textbook corporate damage control. "We take these allegations seriously and are conducting a thorough investigation." But this generic statement only fueled public outrage. Then something unexpected happened. Current and former airline employees began coming forward with their own stories. A retired flight attendant posted a lengthy social media thread about witnessing similar behavior from Ms. Rivera years ago. "I reported it through proper channels," she wrote, "but nothing was ever done." A baggage handler from Atlanta shared his experiences of seeing Ms. Rivera's discriminatory behavior extend beyond the aircraft. She would make comments about certain passengers' luggage, suggesting extra searches based on nothing but prejudice, his post revealed. The airline's problem was clearly deeper than one incident. The tech professional who had media contacts kept her promise. By nightfall, the story was featured on several major news websites. Headlines highlighted not just the discrimination, but the remarkable way passengers united to stand against it. "Strangers unite at 30,000 feet to combat discrimination," read one particularly viral headline. The airline's PR team scrambled to schedule a press conference, but their corporate speak fell flat against the raw authenticity of the passengers' footage. "We have strict policies against discrimination," the spokesperson insisted, while viewers at home could clearly see those policies being violated in the viral videos. The business class flight attendant who had tried to intervene submitted her own written statement to the airline's Human Resources Department. Her detailed account of previous incidents and ignored complaints painted a picture of systematic failure to address discriminatory behavior. Social media continued to buzz with activity. The hashtag Flight 2471 started trending nationally. People shared their own experiences of discrimination during air travel, turning one incident into a movement for industry-wide change. Aviation blogs and travel websites picked up the story, leading to discussions about bias in customer service across the entire industry. The airline's initial response of placing Ms. Rivera on paid administrative leave only made things worse. Paid vacation for discrimination. One viral tweet asked, garnering hundreds of thousands of likes. The public demanded real accountability, not just corporate procedure. By midnight, the airline's stock had taken a noticeable dip. Major investors began asking questions about the company's training procedures and complaint handling systems. The story had evolved from a PR crisis into a serious corporate governance issue. The passenger videos continued to circulate, each viewing bringing new waves of public outrage. But what stood out most wasn't just the discrimination. It was the powerful moment when ordinary people decided they wouldn't be silent witnesses. The footage of passengers standing up, one by one, to support Mr. Kumar became a symbol of collective courage. Restaurant owners began sharing stories of updating their anti-discrimination policies. Schools requested copies of the videos for inclusion in their social studies curricula. The incident was becoming a catalyst for broader conversations about standing up against injustice in everyday situations. As the first day of viral attention drew to a close, the airline realized this wasn't going to blow over with standard PR tactics. They would need to take real action. But would their response be enough to satisfy a public that was tired of empty promises and corporate platitudes? The next few days would prove crucial for both the airline's reputation and the broader conversation about discrimination in customer service. The story of Flight 2471 struck a deep chord with people across the country. As morning news shows picked up the story, thousands of similar experiences began pouring in through social media. The marketing executives' perfectly documented videos had opened a floodgate of emotions and shared experiences. A group of flight attendants from other airlines created an online support group called Sky High Standards, dedicated to sharing stories of discrimination they'd witnessed but felt powerless to stop. Within days, the group had over 10,000 members, each bringing their own perspectives on the need for change in the industry. Mr. Kumar's quiet dignity throughout the ordeal particularly moved people. Morning show hosts praised his composure, while social media users shared how his response reminded them of their own experiences staying calm in the face of discrimination. He showed more professionalism than the professional, one viral comment noted. The retired teacher who had spoken up on the flight appeared on a popular news program. In my 30 years of teaching, she explained, her voice filled with emotion, I always told my students that standing up for what's right isn't about being loud. It's about being consistent and united. Her interview was shared widely, resonating with educators across the country. Community organizations began using the incident as a teaching moment. Local churches, synagogues, and mosques incorporated the story into their discussions about treating others with dignity and respect. Youth groups organized workshops about standing up against discrimination, using the passengers' united response as an example of peaceful but firm resistance. The business class flight attendant's testimony proved crucial. Her detailed account of previous incidents and ignored complaints revealed a pattern that couldn't be dismissed. Other airline employees, feeling emboldened by her courage, began sharing their own documented evidence of similar behavior that had gone unaddressed. The young mother from the flight started a blog about her experience, writing about how she explained the incident to her child. My 5-year-old asked why the lady was being mean, she wrote. How do you explain discrimination to a child who doesn't yet understand hate? Her post went viral, touching parents' hearts nationwide. Civil rights organizations took notice. They reached out to passengers from the flight, gathering statements and evidence for a broader investigation into discriminatory practices in the airline industry. What started as one incident was becoming a movement for systematic change. The college students' videos, showing the contrast between Ms. Rivera's treatment of different passengers, became required viewing in customer service training sessions at various companies. HR departments across the country began updating their training materials, using the incident as a case study in what not to do. Local government officials started asking questions about oversight in the airline industry. State representatives called for hearings on discriminatory practices in public transportation. The incident was transforming from a viral moment into a catalyst for legislative action. The tech professional who had media contacts organized an online forum where people could share their own stories of standing up against discrimination. The forum quickly became a resource for those seeking advice on how to intervene when witnessing unfair treatment. The businessman with 1 million flight miles wrote an open letter to the airline's board of directors, which was published in several major newspapers. As a loyal customer, he wrote, "I'm not just disappointed. I'm demanding change." His words carried extra weight coming from a premium status passenger. Meanwhile, Mr. Kumar received thousands of messages of support from around the world. People shared how his experience had given them courage to speak up in their own situations. His dignified response to discrimination had become a blueprint for others facing similar challenges. Community leaders began organizing workshops on active allyship, using the Flight 2471 incident as an example of how ordinary people can make an extraordinary difference. The marketing executives' videos became powerful teaching tools, showing how documentation and unity can create unstoppable momentum for change. After a week of mounting pressure, the airline finally announced major changes. In a live-streamed press conference, the CEO appeared without the usual corporate backdrop, instead sitting at a simple table with diversity experts and civil rights leaders. His opening words set a different tone. "We're not here to make excuses. We're here to make changes." The airline's first action was decisive. Ms. Rivera's employment was terminated. But more importantly, they announced a complete overhaul of their training and reporting systems. Working with civil rights organizations, they developed new guidelines that went beyond standard corporate policies. The marketing executives' videos would become part of their new training program, showing future employees exactly what not to do. The business class flight attendant who had tried to intervene was promoted to a new position, head of in-flight culture and inclusion. Her first task was creating an anonymous reporting system that would protect employees who spoke up against discrimination. "We need to make it easier to do the right thing," she explained in an interview. The retired teacher's words about standing up against injustice became the cornerstone of the airline's new training motto. Courage is contagious. New employees would learn not just about avoiding discrimination, but about their responsibility to actively prevent it. The airline began requiring all staff to complete monthly workshops on recognizing and addressing bias. Other airlines took notice. Within weeks, major carriers across the country started reviewing their own policies. The Sky High Standards Group, now with over 50,000 members, began consulting with airlines to share frontline perspectives on preventing discrimination. Their insights proved invaluable in creating practical, effective solutions. The tech professionals' online forum evolved into a formal organization, providing resources and support for people facing discrimination in any service industry. They developed a mobile app that helped users document and report incidents while connecting them with advocacy groups for support. Mr. Kumar was invited to join the airline's newly formed Customer Advisory Board, along with other passengers from Flight 2471. Their experiences would help shape future policy decisions. Real change, Mr. Kumar noted in a statement, comes from listening to those who have faced discrimination, not just talking about them. The young mother's blog about explaining discrimination to children caught the attention of educational publishers. She was invited to write a children's book series about standing up for others, using age-appropriate language to teach important lessons about equality and respect. The airline's new training program went beyond traditional sensitivity training. They brought in experts to develop scenario-based learning modules, where employees could practice appropriate responses to challenging situations. The business traveler who had spoken up on the flight was invited to share his perspective during these sessions. Financial institutions took notice of the changes. Investment firms began including anti-discrimination policies in their evaluation of airline stocks. The message was clear. Good ethics meant good business. Other companies started proactively reviewing their own practices, not wanting to become the next Flight 2471. The college students' videos became part of a larger documentary about everyday heroes, regular people who choose to stand up against injustice. The film featured interviews with passengers from the flight, exploring what motivated them to speak up when they could have remained silent. Local airports started displaying posters promoting passenger rights and responsibilities. The message was clear: discrimination wouldn't be tolerated, and passengers had both the right and the responsibility to report inappropriate behavior. Contact information for advocacy groups was prominently displayed. The most significant change was in the corporate culture. The airline moved away from scripted responses and rigid protocols, encouraging employees to use their judgment in treating all passengers with genuine respect. "We're not just training better employees," the new head of culture explained. "We're building better human beings." As these changes took root, something unexpected happened. Customer satisfaction scores began rising across all demographics. It turned out that creating a more inclusive environment didn't just prevent discrimination. It made flying better for everyone. 6 months after the Flight 2471 incident, the airline industry had transformed in ways nobody could have predicted. The marketing executive's original videos had reached over 50 million views, becoming a symbol of how ordinary people could spark extraordinary change. At Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, a special ceremony marked the launch of the Dignity in Flight program. Mr. Kumar, now a respected consultant on customer service equality, cut the ribbon. Behind him stood many of the passengers from that memorable flight, including the retired teacher, the young mother with her child, and the business traveler. They had become more than just fellow passengers. They were now partners in progress. The business class flight attendant, in her role as head of in-flight culture and inclusion, proudly shared the statistics from their new reporting system. Complaints about discriminatory behavior had dropped by 85% across all flights. More importantly, employee reports of successfully preventing discrimination had skyrocketed. Flight crews were no longer afraid to speak up when they witnessed inappropriate behavior. The Young Mother's Children's book series, Kind Skies, had become required reading in elementary schools across the country. Her simple yet powerful messages about treating everyone with respect had resonated with young readers. "Children understand fairness better than adults sometimes," she noted during a book signing event. The Tech Professionals reporting app had expanded beyond airlines to cover all forms of public transportation. With over 1 million downloads, it had become a powerful tool for documenting and preventing discrimination. Transportation companies now regularly checked the app's data to identify and address potential problems before they escalated. Airlines across the world began adopting the training programs developed after Flight 2471. The focus shifted from mere rule following to active inclusion. Flight attendants were now trained to recognize their own biases and support each other in providing equal service to all passengers. The college students' documentary had won several awards and was being shown in corporate training sessions beyond the airline industry. Hotels, restaurants, and retail chains all saw the value in its powerful message about standing up against discrimination. The retirement community where the elderly passenger lived organized regular screenings, sparking important discussions about dignity and respect. Mr. Kumar's consulting firm had grown to include other passengers from Flight 2471. Together, they traveled the country, helping companies understand that preventing discrimination wasn't just about avoiding bad publicity. It was about creating a better society for everyone. Their presentations always ended with a retired teacher's powerful words: "Change happens when ordinary people decide they've had enough." The Sky High Standards Group had evolved into an international organization, with chapters in major cities worldwide. They provided support and resources for transportation workers who wanted to create more inclusive environments. Their motto, "Every journey matters," became a rallying cry for equal treatment in all forms of travel. Flight crews reported feeling more empowered and satisfied with their jobs. The fear of speaking up against discrimination had been replaced by pride in maintaining high standards of service for all passengers. The business class flight attendant often reminded new hires, "Your uniform comes with responsibility, not just authority." The airline stock had not only recovered but reached new highs. Investors recognized that strong anti-discrimination policies weren't just ethically right, they were good for business. Other companies began following their lead, making inclusion a key part of their business strategy. As the transformation continued, the marketing executive reflected on how far things had come. "Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest actions," she wrote in her viral blog post. "All it takes is one person willing to say, 'This isn't right,' and others brave enough to stand with them." The story of Flight 2471 became more than just a viral moment or a corporate scandal. It became a testament to the power of ordinary people standing together against injustice. In airports around the world, a small plaque now reminds travelers of this legacy. On one flight, humanity rose above discrimination. Let us continue to rise together.